Recently, guys, I was talking to Aries in the YouTube comments of one of the videos that I posted about how to use instructional videos more effectively, and he sort of posted about concepts and techniques, and we chatted back and forth, and he asked if I would do a video to expand on my ideas on it. And so Aries, this is your video. And before I get into it, man, I could probably go a long time on this subject, so we'll probably have more videos on this later on. But two things that I want to share with you is that basically one is that it doesn't matter what stuff you study, concepts or techniques, if you don't do something with them, which I'll talk about in a second, it doesn't matter. The second thing is that I think that a lot of times the concepts, the principles, and all these things come to people easier when they're ready for them, and I'll talk about that. So first things first, as I sort of mentioned in that video that we were talking in the comments in that video, it doesn't matter if you're studying concepts or techniques or whatever. If you don't do anything with it, it's useless. You know, because again, by the way, let's rewind a little bit. What is a concept and what is a technique? Concept is an abstract idea used through the symbolism of words to express an idea, express the principles that we're using in jiu-jitsu, the processes that we're using, the systems, express that stuff. The technique is the more broken down chunk of the tactical use of those things at work. So basic use. This is the what are you going to do? And this is kind of the how it all works together and why it all works together, and boom, there you go. So with that said, neither one's better than the other, but ultimately whatever you're studying, you got to put it to use, because otherwise it's like you have the disk or you have the download, because I don't know if anybody uses disks anymore, but you haven't installed it on your device. Yeah, you got it, but you haven't used it, so you haven't installed it, so you can't use it. It's like in the Matrix when Neo is fighting Morpheus in the dojo, and he like links up and they download kung fu to his body. He kind of twitches a little bit, and I know kung fu. Well, it's similar to that. You have to install this information into your body so you can use it. It's not as quick as it was in the Matrix, but the way that you do that is by kind of going back to my other video, you take little bits and chunks of information and you start to use them, right? Because that's the way that we install information into our body. Because jiu-jitsu is about having that stuff installed in the nervous system in the body. It's not about knowing it. Knowing it's great. Like, there's plenty of people. Like, here's a great example. I have a buddy of mine, this is parallels to it. I have a buddy of mine that he has a small business, and he'll go to all these business seminars, buy all these courses and all this stuff, and he'll come back from these things buzzing with ideas, talking about it, parroting off all the stuff that they talked about. But then you'll talk to him 2 weeks later, and he has not implemented anything into it. He's talked about it, he thinks the ideas are cool, but he's never actually got down into the nitty gritty, the dirty work, and actually tried to use it. And so again, it's great. These ideas, conceptually you know them, but you have not used them in any way with any tactical use. You've never put them to practice. And so in that situation, you don't want that to happen to you. So you have to install that stuff into your body, and you do that through drilling, you do it through rolling, you do it through attempts when you're rolling. Because again, most of you guys understand this. When you roll, you don't have the time to press the rewind button and say, okay, let me think about this, right? Like you're acting a lot of times on instinct and whatever's been drilled to your body. Now, the second sort of thing is that when teaching concepts, I think concepts and the more abstract ideas of really understanding those principles make way more sense when you have a base already. What I mean, you'll notice I've got my allergies acting up right now. My voice sounds terrible. But what ends up happening a lot of times is that the principles of jiu-jitsu are at work all the time, whether you know them or not, whether they've been explicitly laid out or not. And in the beginning, a lot of times, I'll express some ideas with people, but ultimately I found as a coach, they've got to be ready for them and they've got to feel them for them to make sense. A great example is wrestlers will come in, and wrestlers have been trained to go to their bellies so that they don't get pinned on their back, right? Well, what ends up happening is when these wrestlers come into the gym, I will tell them and say, listen, do not turn your back. It's a bad idea. In jiu-jitsu, there's a basic principle that we have. We do not turn our back unless there's a very calculated reason why. And as a new person, you're not going to have that reason why, so do not turn your back. They'll hear me and they'll accept it. But then when they roll, what do? They turn their back, and then at that point, I have to choke them. We have to choke them, because what has to happen is they have to feel that principle in use. They've got to feel, every time I turn my back, I get choked. Don't do that. That's when it makes sense. When you basically have the idea floating around, but then the body feels it, boom, now we connect. That's the way that I see it. And a lot of times I see this from my students. Like one of my higher level belts now, but I remember years ago when he was a purple belt, I was teaching a really basic move, and I've taught it the same way over and over and over again. And he learned it from me years ago. I've taught it the same way. My teaching on that move has not changed. But then what happened is as he got better, when I would start to talk about those conceptual ideas, they made way more sense to him, because he was in a much better place, because his jiu-jitsu IQ was much higher. A buddy of mine, Tim Sled, he expressed at one time that in Jiu-Jitsu we start off by learning the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, whatever. Then we learn words, and then we learn sentences, and we learn the syntax, and then we write books and novels, whatever. You get the idea. When someone in the beginning comes in, I will sprinkle the technical, the concepts and principles in there, but really I got to get them just moving a little bit. I have to get their body understanding what's going on. I got to get them to be able to hold mount and stay tight. We'll talk about why they do that, but their body has to feel that stuff first. And then as we come back around over and over again, these concepts and then will begin to stick more and more and more because they've been using it, and their body's going to be ready for it, and they're going to be receptive. In the last sort of parallel that I'll share is that when I started reading Stoicism and getting into that sort of thing, there were ideas expressed in that writing that, again, I never had, sort of heard written that way or seen expressed that way, but they were true to me. And so when I was reading it, I was like, this makes sense to me, right? But these basic principles that they lay out in these different books, they made sense to me. And so they were already there in me. And then when I read the words and the letters and the text, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. Same thing a lot of times with Jiu-Jitsu. The principles are always at work, whether you know them or not. And so that then when someone comes around and you've been training for a bit and they say, hey, by the way, and they give you that conceptual idea about why something's working, it's like, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. And I think people become more receptive to them. So in the beginning, I go a little bit more technique-based just to get people moving, and as they progress, I like to add those conceptual ideas in along the way so they get a deeper understanding as to why the things are working. But again, even if you're training, you may not even think about this. If your coach is explaining certain things, they might be telling you the principles of why a move works. They may not just say it's a conceptual idea. They may not say it's, hey, this is a principle, but they might be telling you, hey, whenever we do this, we need to create in this position, we always need to create a tilt in the shoulder. Well, then that's telling you that's a principle. They may not say it that way, but that's a principle. Or if they're saying, listen, whenever we go in this direction, we always have to watch this hand positioning because of this. There you go. You're now getting these rules that create structure to your game. You're getting a process. That's the way that works. And so, anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but that's kind of a few ideas that I'll share with you guys and you areas. Again, none of this is right or wrong. This is all, again, open to interpretation because, again, we're talking about jiu-jitsu. We're not talking about like math. We're not talking about like stuff that's like hard line. This stuff changes so much. Since I started jiu-jitsu in almost 20 years ago till now, I've seen trends come and go. I've seen verbiage come and go. I've seen positions come and go. You just see all this stuff. And so again, this is an idea to share with you. So anyways, I'm finished talking. And Aries, thanks for the question, brother.